Have you ever imagined that a man could lose everything overnight? His freedom, his honor, and even the people he loves the most? For a crime he didn't commit? Ryan Callahan, a dedicated police officer, suddenly becomes a criminal in the eyes of the world. But when all doors seem closed, his most loyal ally, a Labrador named Odin, discovers a secret that could change their fate forever. But is the truth really powerful enough to turn the tables? Or is Ryan just a pawn in a much larger conspiracy? Before we continue, comment where in the world are you watching this video from? And if you believe in heartwarming stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel now, because tomorrow there's a special story for you. Ryan Callahan never imagined that one day he would walk into a courtroom not as a police officer, but as a defendant. After more than 12 years of service with the Denver Police Department, Ryan had given his all to his job. He had saved the lives of his teammates in tense gunfights, rescued hostages from the most dangerous situations, and never backed down from evil. But today, the very uniform he wore proudly every day became shackles that bound him to a crime he did not commit. In front of him, the jury read the verdict. Each word echoed like a knife to his heart. Guilty. Ryan felt the ground fall from under him. He turned to his attorney, but his eyes were filled with helplessness. It was all set. He had lost from the start. But for Ryan, the most painful thing was not the verdict, not the accusations, nor the scornful eyes of those who once called him a hero. The only thing that weighed heavily on his heart was Odin, the Labrador retriever who had been by his side for years. Odin was more than just a partner. He was his only family. The first day Odin was given to Ryan, he was just a playful puppy with sparkling eyes. Ryan trained him, patiently teaching him every command, every move. But what Ryan couldn't teach Odin was loyalty, because it was already in his every breath. Ryan remembered clearly the nights they lay on the floor of the police station, falling asleep next to each other after a long, exhausting shift. He remembered the time Odin saved him from a shootout, lunging to bite the criminal's hand just as he was about to pull the trigger. He remembered the worried look in Odin's eyes every time he was injured, a look that no human could fake. But who would take care of Odin now? Who would hold his leash every morning? Would he understand why Ryan hadn't come home? Before he was taken to federal prison, Ryan had asked for one thing: not a lighter sentence, not a chance to appeal. He just wanted to see Odin one last time. His request was granted. And when the door opened, Odin came bounding toward him like a bolt of lightning. The dog lunged at Ryan, nuzzling his head against his chest, panting as if he were trying to say something. Ryan knelt and hugged Odin tightly, his trembling fingers digging into the soft fur he had grown accustomed to over the years. "I'm sorry, Odin," he whispered. "Are you okay?" But how could Odin understand? How could he understand that this wasn't just another goodbye? Odin whined, licking Ryan's hand, his brown eyes filled with concern. He didn't know what was happening, but somehow he knew something was wrong. Ryan felt his heart constrict. He hadn't cried when he was sentenced. He hadn't cried when he was handcuffed in front of hundreds of eyes. But now, holding Odin in his arms, he felt a pain worse than death. And then, the unexpected happened. Odin suddenly jerked back, sniffing hard at Ryan's jacket. Ryan was surprised. Odin had never reacted like this to him. It clawed at his chest, barking fiercely. Its eyes changed, no longer the sad eyes of a dog about to part with its master. but the eyes of a warrior who had discovered something important. It barked again, this time louder. The police standing nearby looked at each other in confusion. Odin had picked up on something. An officer stepped forward, checking Ryan's jacket pocket. He slid his hand into the lining, touching something hard. When he pulled his hand out, a tiny object fell to the ground. A USB. The room fell silent. Ryan stared at the tiny object. He hadn't known it was there. No one had known it was there. But somehow, Odin had found it. An officer quickly picked it up and plugged it into the computer. As the data streamed across the screen, the faces of everyone in the room changed. Evidence. Evidence that Ryan had been framed. Ryan couldn't breathe. He looked at Odin, who was still staring at his master, tail wagging slightly, waiting for an order. Just an order. But Ryan said nothing. His throat was tight. His slow nod said it all. Odin hadn't just saved him once, it had saved him twice. But the question was, who had hidden this USB in his shirt? And why did they want him to find it now? Ryan knew the answers were only just beginning. But there was one thing he was sure of more than anything. He was no longer alone, because Odin, his most loyal friend, would always be there, and no one would be able to stop the truth from being revealed. The silence in the courtroom was so thick, it felt as if the air itself had frozen. All eyes were glued to the computer screen, where a low, authoritative voice spoke over the undulating sound waves. He knows too much. We can't let him go free. Blame Callahan. Make sure there are no loopholes. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. His heart pounded in his chest as he recognized the voice. Lieutenant Victor Langley, his commander, the man he trusted completely. But that wasn't the worst of it. The recording continued. Let the forensics team find evidence in his car. If necessary, I'll write a report myself. We're not going to let a dog ruin everything. Odin, still sitting close to Ryan, groaned softly, as if it could sense the deep betrayal that was being laid bare before everyone's eyes. Ryan clenched his jaw. He remembered the night it all fell apart. He was awakened by a knock on the door in the middle of the night. When he opened it, a group of police officers had burst into the house, handcuffing him before he knew what was happening. In just a few hours, his life had gone from that of a respected officer to one that the entire city despised. All the evidence against him had been too perfect, too coincidental to be true. But no one believed him. No one. And now, it was clear. He wasn't being prosecuted for the crime he had committed. He was being prosecuted for some secret he had accidentally learned. The atmosphere in the courtroom was chaotic. Several jurors gasped, while Ryan's lawyer immediately jumped to his feet, asking for a postponement to investigate further. The judge banged his gavel on the table, signaling silence. But his eyes had changed, from impassive severity to caution and caution. We need to verify the authenticity of this recording, the judge announced, but even he could not hide his shock. The case is adjourned until the investigation is complete. Ryan let out a sigh of relief, but his newly formed hope was quickly extinguished by a sense of unease. Langley would certainly not sit idly by while he was investigated. As Ryan was led back to the holding cell, Odin was led in a different direction. Ryan tugged at the handcuffs, reacting instinctively. Wait, I want Odin to stay with me. The officer escorting him, an unfamiliar face, glanced at Ryan, unperturbed. We have orders to take him back to the station. Ryan sensed something was wrong. He tried to remember who had ordered Odin taken away from him. The judge had never said so. Odin had been with him since the case began. Why was it different now? Meanwhile, in a hidden corner of the building, Officer Harper Reed was leaning against the wall, the phone between his shoulder and his ear, his voice filled with concern. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but one thing's for sure. Langley knows we have evidence, and if we don't act now, Ryan may never walk out of his cell again." On the other end of the line, investigative reporter Jake Sullivan's voice rang out, low but urgent. "I'll release the recording tonight, but we need more evidence. There has to be something that ties Langley to organized crime." Harper looked around, then lowered his voice. "I think I know what Odin's sniffing out." In his cell, Ryan sat with his back against the wall, staring blankly at the gray ceiling. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the questions came flooding back. Why had Langley set him up? What would make him so willing to ruin an innocent man's life? A small noise made him jump. Someone was inserting a key into the lock. The cell door opened. Ryan squinted, trying to make out the face of the man standing before him. "Come with me," the man said. Something was wrong. Ryan didn't recognize him, not his usual guard. He took a step back. The man pulled out a gun hidden in his sleeve. "Don't want any trouble? Go." Ryan felt his breathing slow. His entire body tensed, adrenaline exploding through his veins. This was no ordinary escort. He wanted to get him out of there, but not to set him free. Ryan looked around, trying to find an escape route, but the cell had only one door. No weapons. Nothing to help him against a man with a gun. He moved closer, the gun tucked against Ryan's side. Ryan was forced to follow. Every step brought him closer to an outcome he didn't want to think about. Who was behind this? Langley? Or someone even more powerful? And most importantly, where was Odin? Elsewhere in the building, Harper Reed ran down the hallway, trying to track Odin. But when she reached the dog holding area, the door was wide open. Odin was gone. Outside, an unmarked black van was parked in the dark corner of the parking lot. Inside the car, two men held Odin. The Labrador struggled, growling in his throat, but a tight leash around his muzzle kept him from barking. "Don't waste your energy," one of the men sneered. "We've been planning this for a long time." The other checked his watch. "Let's go. We have work to do." The car rolled out of the parking lot, taking Odin with it, and perhaps Ryan's last chance to save him. Ryan had no idea where he was going, but he knew one thing. He couldn't sit by and let others decide his fate. He had to get out. He had to find Odin, and he had to find the truth before it was too late. Harper Reed raced through the darkened hallways of the police station, her heart pounding. She had just done something that would cost any officer dearly if caught, breaking into her superior's safe. In her hand was a thick envelope, incontrovertible evidence that Lieutenant Victor Langley was taking bribes from a Mexican drug cartel. But more importantly, the documents went beyond Langley. They linked her to much bigger names. People she'd never thought would be involved in a crime ring. Sheriffs, judges, even a state senator. Harper swallowed. She knew she had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. But she also knew if she didn't do something, Ryan Callahan would die. Unconsciously, she looked down at Odin. Her loyal Labrador was standing close to her, his intelligent brown eyes alert. Odin had picked up on something in Langley's room, and with it, Harper had found evidence that no one else had expected. But now the only question was, could she get out of here without being seen. Harper walked quickly to the parking lot. She tried to keep her cool, tried to act like this was just another night on duty. But as soon as she got into her car and started the engine, a black SUV with no license plate appeared silently in the rearview mirror. She gripped the steering wheel. Fear spread through her body, but she knew she couldn't panic. She accelerated. The SUV followed suit. Harper took a deep breath, turned the wheel into a small alley, and tried to lose him. But seconds later, the SUV slammed on its brakes in front of her, blocking her escape. The door opened. Two men got out. They weren't wearing uniforms, no badges. But Harper knew who they were. Assassins. The ones people like Langley hired to clean up the mess. One of them chuckled, his hand sliding over the butt of the gun at his hip. "You have something you shouldn't have." Harper swallowed. She could guess what would happen if she didn't hand over the envelope, but she had no intention of letting them have it. She glanced at Odin just for a moment, and that was all Odin needed. Without warning, Odin lunged at the man on his left, fangs sinking into his arm. A scream rang out. The other man drew his gun, but Harper was faster. She lunged from the car, elbowing him hard in the chin. The gun fell to the ground. Without hesitation, Harper grabbed him by the collar, punching him in the face with all her might. The man staggered, but immediately swung his arm back. Harper backed away, but not in time. A punch landed squarely in her ribs. The pain sent her to her knees, but she still held the envelope tightly in her hand. Odin had already knocked the first man down, but the second man quickly pulled out a knife. Harper yelled, "Odin, back up!" But before he could do anything, a pair of headlights flashed behind Harper. Another car had just pulled up. Harper realized one thing: she had no escape. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Ryan Callahan was fighting for his life. The man with the gun pushed him toward the building's emergency exit. Ryan tried to find a way out, but he was too careful. He could sense it. He had no intention of taking him to safety. He would take him away and kill him somewhere. Ryan knew he had only one chance. They stepped out into the garage, and just as he had expected, no one was around. The man tightened his grip on the gun, commanding, "Get in." Ryan stepped in, but as soon as the door closed behind him, he spun around, elbowing the man in the wrist. The gun fell to the floor. Before he could react, Ryan lunged forward, locking his arms around him and pulling him to the ground. He struggled, trying to pull away, but Ryan didn't give him a chance. A hard punch to the jaw knocked him unconscious instantly. Ryan gasped, his eyes darting around. He needed to find Odin. He needed to find Harper. And most importantly, he needed to get the truth out. In a dark corner of the city, the SUV carrying Harper and Odin sped down the highway, kidnapped, thrust into a fight she wasn't prepared for. But at that moment, she understood one thing. She wasn't alone. She looked down at her feet, where Odin was whimpering softly, his eyes filled with determination. Odin knew what was happening, and if there was even the slightest chance of escape, this dog wouldn't miss it. Harper whispered, "Are you ready, Odin?" In a flash, the car suddenly shook violently. Odin had acted, but would they make it out in time? Or would this be the end of it all? The world exploded as the video aired on national television. The screen flashed with undeniable images. Lieutenant Victor Langley secretly meeting with a Mexican drug lord, receiving a suitcase of cash in exchange for his silence. But that wasn't the worst part. At the end of the video, a deep voice spoke. "Callahan knows too much. Get rid of him immediately." There was no doubt about it. Not only was Langley a corrupt officer, he had ordered the killing of his own man. Within hours, the Denver police system was shaken. The FBI was involved. The police chief, the prosecutor, and even a senator who had declared Ryan guilty were questioned. For the first time in 4 months of captivity, Ryan Callahan was no longer an accused man. He became a living witness to one of the biggest corruption scandals in police history. But for Ryan, the most important thing wasn't that those people were caught. The most important thing, that he was free. As the prison gates opened, Ryan stepped outside, sunlight illuminating his face, accustomed to the cold darkness for the past 4 months. And then he heard barking. In an instant, a blonde figure lunged at him, knocking him to the ground. Odin. The Labrador licked his face, wagging its tail frantically as if afraid that if it stopped, he would disappear again. Ryan smiled, a genuine smile he'd forgotten he could give. He hugged Odin tightly, whispering, "You saved me again, kid." Harper Reed stood not far away, watching the scene with a small smile. She had fought alongside Ryan to the very end, and now they had won. But was it over? A year later, on a small farm in the mountains of Colorado, Ryan stands on a lush green lawn, watching the dogs run around in front of him. Odin stands beside him, eyes shining, as he watches the Labrador puppies being trained. When Ryan left the police force, he knew he couldn't go back to his old life. He no longer believed in a system that had tried to destroy him. But he also knew he couldn't stand by. So he opened a canine training center. He and Odin trained dogs, making sure they were trained by people with real ethics, not corrupt people. Inside the center, Harper was checking the list of officers who had signed up to train with them. More than 24 officers from all over the country had applied, because Ryan's story had created a wave of change. The young officers no longer blindly believed in the system. They wanted to do better. They wanted to stand for real justice, not the fake justice that the powerful had created. Ryan took a deep breath. This was not the life he had dreamed of, but perhaps it was the life he needed. That evening, as Ryan was cleaning out the doghouse, a black van slowed to a stop in front of the farmhouse. Harper stepped out of the house, frowning. "Are you waiting for someone?" Ryan shook his head. A man in a suit got out of the car. He didn't look like a cop, didn't look like a reporter, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "Ryan Callahan?" the man asked, his voice calm. Ryan nodded. The man slowly pulled a brown envelope from his pocket. "You might want to see this." Ryan opened the envelope, pulling out a stack of documents. And as soon as he saw the contents, his heart sank. "No way," Harper whispered, because in front of them was a list of officers who had been killed in the past 4 years. All of them were related to the investigation Ryan had been involved in. And on the last line, a name had been added to the list 3 days ago. Lieutenant Victor Langley. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. Langley should have been in a maximum security federal prison, but now he was dead. And the only question was, who killed him? Ryan raised his head, looking straight at the mysterious man. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "I am the one who can help you find the truth." Harper clenched his fists. Odin stood close to Ryan, ears pricked, sensing the danger approaching. Something bigger, more dangerous was lurking beneath it all. The people they had defeated were probably just the tip of the iceberg. Ryan nodded slowly. "I will listen." And their fight was not over. "Thank you for taking the time to follow this emotional story." Perhaps as each second passed, you felt the suspense, the tension, the moments of extreme pain, and then the explosion of justice. But above all, this is not just a story about a wrongly convicted person or a loyal dog who changed the fate of his owner. This is a story about perseverance in the face of adversity, about the power of truth, and about the belief that justice, even if buried, will still find its way back. Ryan lost everything, but instead of succumbing to fate, he fought to the end. And Odin, with his unwavering loyalty, proved that sometimes the most trustworthy friend is not a human, but a loyal heart that has never lied. So what is the lesson of this story? The truth may be distorted, but it never disappears. That no matter who is against you, as long as you don't give up, there will always be light at the end of the tunnel. And most importantly, honest and brave people will always find each other, even in the most difficult circumstances. Now, I want to ask you something. How many points would you give this story from 0 to 10? Leave a number in the comments section and share your thoughts. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to click like to spread this powerful message to more people. And if you know someone who needs a little hope, a little inspiration to overcome challenges, share now. Maybe that's what they need most today. But wait, is this story over? Or is it just the beginning? Because after all, Ryan has found justice. But what about the secrets that have not been exposed? Will the forces in the dark stop? And the biggest question, are loyalty and righteousness strong enough to fight against the powerful people hiding behind the curtain? Do you want to discover the next truth? If so, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss out on more fascinating, meaningful, and powerful stories. Get ready, because what's coming next will make you restless. See you in the next stories.